here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Well, welcome inside to the Alex Garrett Podcast Network. And with me right now is someone who, once again, I met through the National Publicity Summit, Raleigh Sadler. Raleigh, thanks for joining me today.
Alex, thanks for having me.
Now, you are part of an organization that empowers local churches to fight human trafficking. Let My People Go. But first, I got to say, shout out to MJ Kronfeld because she's our mutual connection. How about that?
Yeah, she is.
Raleigh, you are the founder and executive director of Let My People Go. Tell us about your ministry work and this work to combat human trafficking, and especially because it is Human Trafficking Awareness Month.
Yeah, it's towards the end of the month, I think, that people really understand, wow, we're really focusing on human trafficking. Maybe it's a big deal. Maybe it's a problem.
And isn't this migrant crisis a big part of the mission now to stop human trafficking?
I would define human trafficking as the exploitation of vulnerability for the commercial gain. So whether it's for sex, labor, or domestic servitude, it's someone with power exploiting someone with a little less. And they don't have to have all that much power to exploit someone, just enough to have leverage. And so when you have a situation like the migrant crisis, you have these people who are coming into a new country where they may not have networks, or at least not networks that are the most healthy for them. And then many of them are being sent from one place to another, many arriving in New York City, where there is not infrastructure to care for them. Like, the NYPD and local nonprofits and the city government are doing the best that they can. But at the end of the day, you have a ton of vulnerable people in a city where there is demand for exploitation and demand for sexual exploitation. And for me, it just seems like a cocktail that will ultimately end up in the trafficking of a lot of people who came to the country looking for hope, only to find something different.
Through Let My People Go, it sounds like a beautiful effort partnering with, churches locally and nationally, but is it heartbreaking as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's very difficult, especially when this is the world that you live in and you're consistently talking about exploitation or seeing people who have been hurt in churches or people who've been trafficked by people that were family members. And I think that's what drives me to see churches become safe places for vulnerable people, so that the church will look at their vulnerable neighbor, regardless if their neighbor is a new immigrant or if their neighbor is someone who's living with mental illness or someone who's been formerly incarcerated, that they would look at this person as their neighbor and say, okay, how can we connect with this person? How can we include them in what we're doing in the community? How can we listen to them and see what they're seeing in the community? Because I think we all need each other, and I want to see churches really grasp that the vulnerable people in their community are people that they can care for. And I think when they care for them in that way, they're going to fight trafficking.
Raleigh, a big word that gets thrown around is the word smuggling, and I'll tell you, I get frustrated when I see like the Washington Post or other outlets say, okay, well, here's the issue, but they don't want to address it. They just state it. I mean, isn't that frustrating to you when you see stories on that, but they don't do anything else? They just write about it. Is that a good start, though?
Well, I think with smuggling and human trafficking will always be a little different, though smuggling could turn into human trafficking. Like if you go to the Homeland Security's website, when they talk about human trafficking, they always have a caveat where they say human smuggling and human trafficking are going to look differently, because at the end of the day, with trafficking, there's an expected exploitation of some sort. With smuggling, there could just be moving someone, even though it's exploitative. Coyotes can often be very exploitative. Well, you were only supposed to pay $5,000, but now we want $30,000. There's that, but there's the piece with trafficking where you're ultimately trafficked for labor, sex, or domestic servitude.
Is there any stats? Is there any stats you could tell us, by the way, about these traffickers, what they go through and how many go through this every year?
Yeah, so around the world, there are as many as 50 million people who are held in what amounts to modern-day slavery. I mean, numbers go from 24 million to 150 million, or to 50 million rather, it's $150 billion industry. So the amount of money that comes from it is staggering. And the majority of human trafficking takes the form of like forced labor, people working in fields, or people forced into marriage, or things like that. But the majority of the money comes from sex trafficking.
And I know it can be as unfortunately as young as 13, 14. I mean, it can get pretty young and pretty ugly, can't it?
Absolutely. And I think the key word here is vulnerability, because anyone can be vulnerable, and oftentimes traffickers are targeting people who are vulnerable, and they might be children, they might be women. Oftentimes they can be someone from another culture where they don't have the networks or the close family units to protect them. And yeah, it can get really messy real quick, because most traffickers are masters at exploiting that vulnerability. They're like sharks in the water. You know, a shark senses blood, he knows what to do. And that's exactly how a trafficker works.
Raleigh, do you consider yourself a psychologist as well when it comes to this? Because there's a lot of psychological torture and physical that go on with for these traffickers, or aren't there?
Yeah. I'm not a psychologist by trade, but it's one of those things that you have to be aware of, because most of the people, their chains aren't physical. Their chains are emotional, they're psychological. There's trauma bonds that hold people to their exploiters. They've experienced an intense experience and they're kind of stuck. And then their trafficker often manipulates that.
Not only
Some
that,
people have
they
compared
make it threatening to even open up. So how do you guys get these girls and all kinds of people trafficked? How do you get them to open up, if you will, and just really either tell their story or help them get out of their situation?
You know, I once heard a pastor say that relationships move at the speed of trust. And I think that's really what's at play here. Is a lot of people want to fight human trafficking as long as it's fast, as long as it moves along, as long as they can get people from point A to point B. So there's definitely a rise in the paramilitary approach to ending trafficking, because, you know, at that point you get to feel macho, you get to feel like you're doing something. And there is a time and place for that, especially within certain cultures. That said, I think the harder work and the more necessary work is the work that anyone in any community can do, and that's building relationships with people who are experiencing unity. It's finding the single parents. It's finding the people who have just exited the penal system and talking to them, getting to know them, being a safe person for them, taking that risk, because it's those people that traffickers target. Traffickers aren't looking, like I've said a couple of times, traffickers aren't looking for people who have strong, tight-knit families. They're not. They're looking for the people on the fringe. They're looking for the people who are, in a sense, vulnerable, but also villainized by the larger community, which is why when you bring up migrants, that makes perfect sense, because for many, they're looking at this migrant crisis and they're blaming the migrants. And in some ways, like, you know, they might be able to build a case in some way, but I think what people can fail to do is see the inherent vulnerability that someone who's coming to this country with nothing has. And so, yeah, some have nefarious means, I'm sure, probably, but more often than not, you're seeing vulnerable people who are just trying to find a new life, and traffickers exploit that.
Does Let My People Go, or do you personally do what they would call rescue missions, or how does that work?
No, so when we work with churches, our goal is primarily to help that church recognize and respond to their neighbors who traffickers would normally target. And so it's finding the populations in your community that could be susceptible and intentionally building bridges into those populations to where you're getting to know them, you're serving them, you're making your church a safe place for them so that they can feel like they can be part of this spiritual family.
Do you find that these women, these kids, even and others who are trafficked, come to God or already have this belief in God that they know He can get them out of this as well?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you have, like, I had someone from Homeland Security call me once, and he said, "Hey, do you know any churches? Because what we're finding is we're rescuing people, and that's great, but a lot of the people who are being rescued, they're missing that component. They want a faith-based organization that they can be part of. They want to be part of a faith-based community because they know that that was also something that was manipulated. See, traffickers don't just manipulate people emotionally and physically and psychologically, but they also spiritually abuse people as well. And they put themselves in the place of God for that person and make that person fully dependent on them. And so finding holistic healing often looks like appealing to the spiritual side as well.
Well, this is I feel like this is great work that you guys are doing. Now, Raleigh, any success stories you could tell us while we have you here today to start off Human Trafficking Awareness Month?
Shortly after Let My People Go launched, we were still in the prototype phase, and I had several pastors that I was working with from across denominational lines, from across even ethnic and age-based lines. I really wanted to get my finger on the pulse of what was happening in the city of New York. And I'll never forget, a pastor called me and he said, "Hey, Raleigh, I don't know what to do." And I said, "Okay, let's talk about it." And he said, "We were giving out coats in Queens. They were in Ridgewood, Queens. We're giving out coats, and a young woman came to me, and she was from Central Asia. She spoke broken English, and I couldn't really communicate with her much. And she was able to communicate that she had gotten a job at a place right next to the church, which happened to be a massage parlor. Now, not every massage parlor is an illicit massage parlor, but a couple of months later, he gets a text from some people in the church saying, "Hey, on our community Facebook page for Ridgewood, someone posted a brothel." He clicks the link and he sees the face of the girl to whom he gave a coat in a provocative pose. And he's calling me. He's like, "What do I do?" And I said, "At this point, you reach out to your local precinct and you just start up a conversation." And the police chief was so encouraged that a community leader just in the community that he said, "You know what? We're going to pull out all the stops. We're going to park a car in front of this place, a police car." He's like, "And if it's not illicit, it shouldn't bother their business. But if it is, that should disrupt some things." And then they just kept this relationship going. And because of one girl who met one pastor who addressed one police captain about one brothel, 28 illicit massage parlors were shut down in Ridgewood, Queens. And I'll never forget hearing, I remember I was walking into a meeting and someone said, "Hey, you do something about human trafficking, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Man, I live in Ridgewood, Queens, and I was in a coffee shop, and this guy was talking to this other guy pretty loudly, and he said, 'I can't buy sex in Ridgewood anymore because they closed all the places down.'" And it blew my mind that all it took was one person to show interest, and it led to really a change in the neighborhood.
You know, the connectedness between precincts and between state lines. I mean, I feel like Let My People Go is it's starting to cross state lines, like even the communications between police departments. Do you notice this is stretching beyond just New York now?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there has to be a lot of collaboration, especially with different law enforcement agencies and nonprofits. And so as as it is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, I think it's very important for the listener to know that there is a human trafficking hotline number that you can call. And you can call this number to learn more about human trafficking, but you can also call this number if you have actionable intelligence. Like if you've seen something and you're a little nervous about it, you got that uh-oh feeling. You're a little like, I don't like this. You can call 1-888-3737-888.
How do you protect those that report, and is it anonymous? I mean, because I feel like all of a sudden you'll have those after you for reporting them, right?
Yeah, it's anonymous, and what they'll do is they're a hotline that will ultimately they'll write up a case, and they'll get enough to be able to send that to either Homeland Security, FBI, local law enforcement, state law enforcement. And so many of them kind of work with the hotline, and that keeps a good connectivity and collaboration on this.
Raleigh, this is so great. I got to ask you this though, because it's the digital age, right? And so does that make this work challenging, easier? What do you think about the digital side of this trafficking crisis we're in?
Yeah, I mean, every week a new app drops, and if you're an exploiter, you're consistently thinking, how can I leverage this new technology? Like, people have been exploited through Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok. I mean, OnlyFans. Like, people, like, just because someone's smiling on the other side of the screen doesn't mean they want to be there. And so, really, yeah, I think it's kind of coming into this in a way that's not naive, to where we don't look for a demon behind every bush, but we look at technology as, the technology may not be evil, but there could be people with horrible intentions who want to leverage that technology for their own gain.
We've seen a lot of efforts, quote unquote, I guess you'd say, by these social media companies. Are they doing enough? I mean, I feel like Let My People Go fills that in-person void, right? Where, or even the digital void, where they're not doing enough, right?
Well, there's so much to do, and it's like right now, we're just hoping that in some ways, like, that they would put something on porn sites where they were able to say, like, you have to prove you're this age, or that major social media outlets would ultimately do something about the pornography that's on their sites. It's people don't want to see the connection between trafficking and pornography, but oftentimes pornography is used, especially internet pornography, is used to groom the people who are trafficked, to show them this is what you're supposed to do, this is how you're supposed to do it. But oftentimes people who are trafficked end up in pornography. Oh. Not everyone's there because of a willing choice.
Raleigh, isn't this a reason why sex work legalization, and the problem is it's become such a judgy thing, right? But it's really at the heart of it, hey, you're enabling this other illegal, dangerous stuff to happen when you legalize this, right?
Yeah, I think that's the heart of the Nordic model, or the partial decrim model, where it says we decriminalize the people who are doing that, like who are in prostitution, who are being prostituted, is probably how I would say it. And we decriminalize them so that they're able to get care if they need it. But then we criminalize the buyers and the sellers, because at that point you're finally addressing demand, because the traffickers are going to sell, and they're making the majority of the money. That's what people don't understand. Like, from a lot of the things that we've seen in the movement, and a lot of my friends who are trafficking survivors, they'll say, I never saw money exchanged. I wasn't out there just getting rich. And so, yeah, I think it's really finding out how we can ultimately hold the buyers and the sellers accountable. And I think in that way, you're able to address it. But when people just kind of carte blanche say, all right, we're just going to take away the penalty from everything, well, then you're going to have more black market stuff. You're going to have more exploitative stuff because people aren't going to want what they can just get at the store. They're going to want the more intense stuff. I feel like that's how this often works.
Somehow, the city's allowed a ring, if you will, to form in Roosevelt Avenue in Queens, and I still don't know how that whole thing formed. But do you guys keep an eye when you hear these prostitution rings are happening? All right, we got to keep an eye on this to see how we can shut it down and then save those that are in the ring.
Well, and you think about Roosevelt Avenue, I mean, that has been building for years. I mean, there has consistently been almost an organized exploitative presence when it comes to prostitution there. I mean, I was hearing stories right after I moved there of people being trafficked in beds in the back of like moving trucks where, you know, you get a card with some flowers on it and a phone number. You call the phone number and they pick you up. I mean, I was hearing stories like that from law enforcement agencies. And so you have these immigrants who are moving to the neighborhood with nothing, and they're doing everything they can to figure out their situation, and often of that.
You know, I'm just thinking the Me Too movement was supposed to stop all of this, wasn't it?
I think the different movements that have come out in the last 5 years, all of them have been calling attention to things, even the human trafficking movement. But the problem is when you call attention to things, it sometimes feels like it's getting worse. But I don't know if it is getting worse as much as you're just seeing it more clearly now. And you're realizing that you didn't see it, that you were blind to it the whole time.
You know, we met about 4 or 5 years ago already, and the growth since 5 years has to make you feel proud that what you're doing is working and dare I say, expanding.
Well, when you start a nonprofit, you're just excited to be there 5 years later. You know, it's like, as long as, like, because, I mean, it's hard out there. And the pandemic was really tough, especially on small, scrappy nonprofits. It was very tough. And so surviving that and being able to live to fight another day is,
and I feel like you're
always great.
From what we've talked about, I feel like you've started this because you felt the government wasn't doing enough. Am I right on that?
Well, no, it was more, I didn't feel like the church knew how to do anything. If you don't know how to respond, you're either going to do the first thing that comes to mind, which is always the worst thing. That's the Messiah complex. I'm going to fix the problem. I'm going to rescue the girls. I'm the hero. Or you do nothing because you're overwhelmed. I remember when I was in Kentucky, I was a seminarian at the time, and I was at a coffee shop. And this woman runs out of the alley and says these two people stole her purse. Everyone else left. Everyone else ran. And they chased down the guys. And I just went and got my coffee. But then it started to build, and I started to feel bad, and I started to feel shame. And I was like, well, I got to do something. What am I going to do? So I jumped in my car, and I had no plan. I'm like, was I going to hit these guys? I don't think so. But I didn't know. I had no plan. And I think when you do that, that can be very dangerous. And I think you hear about human trafficking, and if you don't have a plan or an MO, you're going to end up hurting other people and hurting yourself.
Well, and it's because it hurts our communities at the end of the day, doesn't it? And I know that you mentioned the pandemic. There were a lot of codes that those facing domestic violence could use for the local pizzerias. Are there codes that those who are brave enough to get out of this trafficking can use and call their local pizzeria or call their local business and say, hey, you know, so-and-so, this is about to happen. Is there any sort of code system there?
I'm sure there are. One thing I've noticed that almost in every airport you go to in the United States, and honestly internationally in some cases, there are signs in the bathrooms, and you'll find, like, in a lot of public places where there would be a lot of people, there are often signs in bathrooms that say, hey, here are the signs of human trafficking. If these things are happening, here's the number you can call. And I'm sure nonprofits may have things where there are codes, but I think oftentimes it's getting that information out there, getting that human trafficking hotline number out there, to where if someone is ready to get out, they don't want to be there, and they're able to take that step of faith, there's information for them.
And by the way, the website is just to let our listeners know again.
Our website is lmpg.org, like Let My People Go, lmpg.org.
Now, you mentioned the Super Bowl. I know this is a big Super Bowl month, but I'd love to continue this throughout the month if you want to come on for updates on how you guys have fared during this whole month. And then, I always believe in continuing the conversation after the Awareness Month, because it always ends at a certain point, right? But that's not what this podcast is. We like to continue the conversation.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, Raleigh Sadler, thank you so much. And, I originally reached out to you about the Israeli conflict because we've seen a lot of hostages there. I don't know if you want to mention about your thoughts on that personally, because you have a lot of thoughts on that as well, and those that have been sort of abducted and kidnapped. And is that the sort of same situation that we see here in America when those who are trafficked get kidnapped, or is there a difference? I've been trying to figure this out since October 7th.
Yeah, oftentimes with human trafficking, it's not everyone who's trafficked is kidnapped. Many people are often groomed, and so they're it's a longer process, and the person they'll befriend them, they'll offer them things, they'll treat them really wonderfully, and then they'll exploit that relationship that they've built, because it's way easier to keep someone who thinks that they're there by their own choice than to take someone against their will. Yeah, most people are groomed. And I would say with regards to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and really any worldwide conflict, when you have a conflict of this magnitude, no matter where it is in the world, people's vulnerabilities are going to be exploited. And at some point during that process, I promise you that there will be traffickers standing ready to exploit those people. So if someone loses everything, if someone's family members die, no matter where you are, there will be traffickers standing ready to exploit them.
And that's why Let My People Go stays vigilant. That's why the founder of Let My People Go, Raleigh Sadler, is staying vigilant, and why he's on the show today, because he's willing to speak out about this and wanting to let people know about this. And I appreciate you wanting to do that here on the show.
No, thank you for having me.
All right, that was it. Thank you so much, Raleigh. That was perfect.